listening to, you are absolutely listening to the George Espenlaub Show, coming to you live from the Funny Farm. Now, with no further ado, here comes Georgie!
Thank you once again. All right. You are listening to the George Espenlaub Show, coming to you live from the Funny Farm in a place called Our World. We don't have no tangible address. We never did. We don't. And as far as I know, I don't think we'll ever have one. Boy, they're slow tonight, I'm telling you. Wow. Hey, this is Sunday night, and we're broadcasting all evening. If you missed the last show, we played the audio of our live stream when we had Anthony Griggs, former linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cleveland Browns, a tremendous man. He's concerned about people. He is a delight. If you missed it, please go in and listen to it. You can listen to it anytime. Go back and listen to it, download it, distribute it, do whatever you want with it. But, wow, whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world, thank you for taking the time to tune in tonight, this Sunday night. This is football day, I know that. And there is one coming on in just a little bit. But with the devices we have today, you can watch football and put them earbuds in, and you can listen to the George Espenlaub Show. I sure hope you do that. Pass the word, because we are going to do another audio of a live stream we did a week or so ago with Mr. Jim Rumford. Tobacco, Trust, and Trump. The Forgotten War in America that created big government. It is relevant for today, and as you listen, you will realize just how relevant that really is. So we invite you to kick back and listen to this intriguing man as he tells the story. It's a part of American history that was kept in the dark, but now, thanks to him, he's bringing it to light. He's written the book, Tobacco, Trust, and Trump. Please, and you'll hear the website, how to get it on Amazon, so on and so forth. Wow, we've had a delightful couple hours, and we may come back again for another one after this is over. Charlie and I and some of the gang here at the Funny Farm are going to talk it over. But we'll let you know before the show is over whether we're coming back or not. The chat room is open. I invite you to come on in, spend some time with me, and enjoy Jim Rumford, Tobacco, Trust, and Trump. All right, now we're live, and we're going to do this. We're going to do that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, lend me both of your ears, because we are now live. You're listening and you're watching the George Espenlaub Show, coming to you, that's right, live from the Funny Farm in a place called Our World. We don't know where it's at. We don't know the address. All we know is We live here, and we have fun living here. Whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world, I'm delighted to have you tonight. We invite each and every one of you to come on in and be part of the show tonight. Put your comments up, ask questions, whatever you want to do, but be a part of this show. We have two goals here. One is to bring a smile to your face. Two, it's to make you just as goofy as the rest of us around here at the Funny Farm. If we can accomplish one of those things, we'll be happy. If we can do both of them, we'll really be glad. So we invite you to reach out to people that you might know. Get a hold of them by whatever device you can get a hold of them with nowadays. I guess you can still talk to your neighbor across the fence or over the hedge, or just walk around the corner and say hello. But whatever it takes, find somebody and tell them to come on in, because the George Espenlaub Show is live right now, and we have a fantabulous, that's an Espenlaub word, a fantabulous night for you. So we want you to sit back and enjoy it, and we'll be back in just one moment. All righty. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me pull this down for a second. Wrong one. Wrong button. Espenlaub needs to find the right button. There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, we have with us tonight as our guest, Mr. Jim Rumford. We had his daughter Stephanie on this afternoon, kind of like a prelude to the show tonight. But he has written one of the most fabulous books that I have read in a long time. Tobacco, Trust, and Trump. How America's Forgotten War. Remember those words. How America's Forgotten War created big government. Wow. It is a fantastic read. Somewhere along the line, this part of history stayed in the dark, dark corners. But thanks to this man, he's bringing it out and letting everyone know. And this is what you can do. If you want the book, go right there. Go to Amazon.com. Yeah, .com. And you can get the book. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. I think you can get a signed copy, right, Jim? Off of PayPal or something. Did I see that?
Signed copy, if they want that, they can get that from us.
Okay.
Through the tobaccowars.com, and we'll sign one and send them out to them.
Right there it is, the tobaccowars.com. So make sure you go there, and we'll flash these thingies up here as we go along tonight with our program. What a tremendous, tremendous book. It is spectacular. A part of history, and I'm a real history buff, but I can honestly say I never heard of it. Never heard of it. So I guess I'm not alone until I came across Mr. Jim Rumford and his daughter Stephanie and saw his book, and here we are. Thank you so much, Mr. Jim, for being with us. I know you're a very busy man, running your business, getting your book out there, coming on radio shows and TV shows and all the other things that's going on. I appreciate you giving us some time tonight. Thank you, sir.
Well, George, it's a pleasure to be with you tonight and with your audience. I think it'll be entertaining for the next hour or so.
Yes.
Appreciate you having me on.
It will be quite entertaining. This tobacco wars, it took place in the early 1900s. Is that correct?
That's correct. About 1900, 1908. 1902, 1908. It's about 6, 7, 8 years. Yes.
The ironic thing about it is that you are personally involved in the history of this thing.
Both sides of my family were part of this. Yes.
One was on one side and one was on the other side, right?
That's correct.
When I was reading your book, I was intrigued. I was thinking, my oh my, how times have changed. I was reading the book when you and your grandfather took that little parcel of land, and what was involved in just getting the land ready to make a tobacco crop. A lot of hard work back then.
Well, what you had to do is my grandfather helped me raise 1/10 of an acre of tobacco as a sharecropper from a landowner. And so at the end of the year, the check was for $300 and I got $150. Now, $150 in the early 50s was a lot of money. That's where you buy a pair of jeans for $1.79. You could buy a new Chevrolet for $1,500. So things were very inexpensive, so to speak, but tobacco was a very good cash crop. So to start the crop, the first thing you have to do is you have to sterilize your tobacco bed, which is going to raise your tobacco plants. So you would take logs, set them on fire, then tie them up with chains, and then you take your horses, you pull those logs through the tobacco bed to burn it to sterilize the land, because the tobacco seed was very fine, very small, very tiny. And so after you burn the tobacco bed, you rake it out, then you would plant your seeds, and then you would cover the tobacco bed with canvas, cotton canvas. And then the tobacco plants would start to grow. Then after they start to grow, it's time to set tobacco. You would then pull the plants from the tobacco bed, as we had, as some people called us, the rich Bracken County tobacco farmers. We had tobacco setters, horses and tractors. So we would set the tobacco with a tobacco setter into your field. And then as it grew, you would cultivate it with a team of horses to cultivate it. Then when the tobacco plant got so high, you'd have to go in and hoe it with a hoe by hand. And then you'd have to top it, or not top it, but you have to sucker it by hand. You have to worm it, take the worms off and crush them by hand. And then you would have to hoe the weeds out of it. This went on for the summer until it came up to time to cut it. Then before you cut it, you'd top it. Then you would then come back and then you would cut the plant with a tomahawk. And then you'd have a tobacco stick in the ground with a spear on the top. And then you'd put 6 plants onto a stick, let it wilt, have your tractor or horses come up with a wagon, load it up, put it in the barn, and hang it in the tiers. It could be 4, 5, 6 tier high barn. Then you let it come into case. And then after it came into case, you pull it down and you strip it, tie it into 3 or 4 different hands, or in 3 or 4 different grades. Then you would strip it down. You would press it to get the air out of it, put it on tobacco baskets, take it to market and sell it. So that was basically what you did year long to get a crop of tobacco to market.
I found it interesting, somewhat humorous, although I don't think you did at the time, where you said you could go either up high and hang them or stay down low. But if you stayed down low, then you got all the dirt and things that fell from the top, right?
Well, you put the you would put the tobacco sticks up on the top tiers. You'd shake it out, and all the dirt would come down on the top of the guys that was working down below. But up above, in that tobacco barn at that time of year, say August, September, it was 130 degrees up there, so it's hot. So you're either hot and clean or cool and dirty. That was your choices.
So there was no in between when it came to that part of the job.
It got hot in those barns because they weren't painted. They were just wood, and that was absorbed the heat into the barn to cure the tobacco for process.
Where did you first hear or learn of this thing called the Tobacco Wars?
My great grandfather, George Washington Kinney, put together a scrapbook about the turn of the century, about 1900, and he would clip out the newspaper articles of the day and put them in this scrapbook. And so over the next 10 years, he filled the scrapbook up with newspaper articles. So those kids would pull that scrapbook out from under the couch, and we'd go through them with myself, my sister. My brother was too young, and my cousins. And we look over these wars of burning down warehouses, horsewhipping farmers. A couple of guys got killed. And so it was always in the Cincinnati Times-Star, the Cincinnati Post, Bratton County News, many different newspapers that was put in the scrapbook at the time. And that's where we kind of got annulled with it. It was really enabled with it. It was really great stories at the time. And so we grew up with it. Then when I was a kid, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, we'd be working the tobacco batch with the older fellows. And they would talk about the wars, because this is about 1948, 1950. So you still had older men that remembered what happened in those days. So that's where the stories came from. So it was always basically newspaper articles, hand down information. So it was kind of a common thing back then.
Wow. I think, and if I don't have it, I will have to go get it real quick. But there's some of these pictures here, and I'm supposing they came out of the scrapbook. I mean, outside of your book here.
Yes, they did. They're in the scrapbook. We still have the scrapbook, which is 120 years old. Wow.
Some of these pictures are just. This one here really, really caught my eye. This was a militia out of Kentucky. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
We were talking before we went on the air. The first thing I did when I got the book was look at the back cover, and it said, imagine a militia of 10,000 men. And I said this to Stephanie this afternoon. When I first looked at it, I thought, nah, not 10,000. Maybe it's 1,000. So I had to refocus and go back and get a hold of it again. But lo and behold, it was 10,000. What was the size of area, the states that was involved in this ruckus?
It was pretty much Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas, Virginia. And those states, guys got together. They were the sheriff, the deputies, the police officers. It was the judges. It was the merchants. It was the farmers. And what happened, the price of tobacco went from, say, 5, 10, 20 cents a pound down to a penny a pound about the turn of the last century. And finally, the farmers said, it's time to fight. We are not going to put up with this anymore. So they put together 10,000 militia guys in those states. Also, there was 650,000 people involved in it. So if you go back to the Civil War, you had people on both sides, the North and South, brother against brother, father against son. So now, when that was over, the farmers went back to their farms. And they kind of got reestablished around 1870. In 1870, they started raising tobacco. And tobacco was a big crop. Mr. George Washington Duke, he was a Confederate Navy guy. And when the war was over with, they cut him loose from, I think, Annapolis, and he walked home to North Carolina. And lo and behold, he found 5 tobacco barns full of tobacco that the northern guys didn't burn down. So they started making tobacco products in a chicken coop. And the chicken coop, they produced chewing tobacco, snuffing tobacco, and all this good stuff. One thing that was new back in 1848 was in Adams County, Ohio, there was a horticulturist guy that developed a tobacco seed. He took it over to Kentucky because the land is much better in Kentucky than it is in Ohio. And so they raised their first crop of tobacco in 1848 of smoking tobacco. Before that, it was all chewing tobacco, pipe tobacco, cigar tobacco. So now we got this new product that you can inhale. And so as the Confederate soldiers and the Yankee soldiers would go back and forth through northern Kentucky or Bracken County, they got hooked on smoking tobacco. So that's when the things started to go pretty good. So as things went on, the Civil War came along, and they got hooked on it. And then after the war was over with, white burley tobacco was manufactured basically or raised basically in northern Kentucky. And so they had a monopoly on that market for a long time. But now you had many, many different tobacco companies raising many, many different types of tobacco products. And so this was part of that deal. And so the tobacco farmer in the 1870s to 1900, very prosperous guys selling tobacco for 5, 10, 20 cents a pound. So they were making good money. They built a lot of beautiful mansion houses down there, all through the South. And so it was very, very productive. So then Buck Duke comes along, and as his father said, George Washington Duke come along and said, Buck Duke can't be my son. He's ruthless. He's a vicious, dirty guy. So at this time, the Duke brothers were taking over the company. And so in 1890, they formed the American Tobacco Trust. Now, before this, you had the Banking Trust, the Steel Mill Trust, all the different trusts. The Steel Mill Trust was formed in 1882. And then over the years, you got in line with many, many different trusts, which were basically monopolies. Buy out your competition, vertical integration, and you control the market. So when he had the monopoly, he became the only buyer. So he's an monopolist. So he's the only buyer in town. So that's when the prices went from 5, 10, 20 cents a pound down to a penny or 2 pennies a pound. The farmers couldn't make any money. So that's when the night riders were established. And that's when they came into being that they're going to get revenge for what the monopolists had done to them. Now, the monopolists were also the Railroad Trust, the Steel Trust, the Banking Trust, the Oil Trust, and all these trusts. There was hundreds of them that developed themselves at the time. So then Teddy Roosevelt comes along and said, hey, we're going to bust this thing up. So then Teddy Roosevelt worked with the Supreme Court to break up the trust. So now you've got the trust broken up, and the rich guys, the Vanderbilts, the Dukes, the Rockefellers, all the guys, the rich guys, they said, now what are we going to do? Well, they get on a train at midnight in New York. They go down to Jekyll Island. There's a book about Jekyll Island and what happened there. And at Jekyll Island, they formed the Fed and the IRS. And that's how they were able to control the money of the country, and they still do as of today.
Buck Duke's father, who came home from the war, walked back into North Carolina, and found 5 barns full of tobacco. That in and of itself was a miracle. Was he a pretty straight up guy?
He was a good man. Yes, he was. Straight up guy who's concerned with his family. And back when he got out of the war, his sons were very young, and they started making tobacco products in a chicken coop. Chicken coops weren't that big. Mm-hmm. So they started very humble means, and they progressed forward. Then Buck Duke and his brother, they're the ones that really set forth the selling tobacco through North and South America, over in Europe, and also into Asia. So they had a multi-billion-dollar operation come the turn of the century. Very creative guys. They did a hell of a job. And they had a big operation in New York City. So they were wining and dining with the finest people of the time.
I watched on the History Channel years ago, and I'm sure that many others have, about Vanderbilt, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller. Uh, I called them, I called them scallywags, uh, because they were utterly ruthless, and whatever it took to put somebody out of business, uh, they had no qualms about doing what they had to do to eat up the little guy.
That's correct. They did. The little guy was a threat. So the best way to keep a little guy down is to restrict his financial capabilities, is what they did very effectively. Now, the night riders, what they would do is they would go out and pull a farmer out of his house in the middle of the night, as my grandfather was, George Washington Jet was pulled out of the house and horsewhipped till he bled out. But the guy who did that was the other great-grandfather, George Washington Jet. And he was the one that horsewhipped him and then burned down our tobacco barns. Well, there was a few guys that got killed in that event, but not many. Maybe a dozen, maybe 2 dozen, very few. But if you look at the steel mill trust, the railroad trust, the Pinkerton guys, they were pretty ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
So when they would go on strike for higher wages, which they weren't going to give them, then the Pinkerton guys would go on with the local sheriff or the local federal guys. They go into those plants to get them to go back to work, and they'd shoot 200 or 300 guys and kill them on the spot and put guys back to work. And that went on in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, Southern Ohio, and also out west. So, as you know, you've heard the stories about Jesse James and Frank James, who rode against the Pinkerton guys. They hated the Pinkerton guys, and they were outlaws, but they came out of the Confederacy, and when the war was over with, they weren't done with the war. So they were out there trying to get revenge. And speaking of those 2 guys, I worked with a fellow. His name was Frank James. Frank James was Jesse James's great nephew and Frank James' great grandson. So I worked with him in St. Louis back in the 60s. And so I heard many stories about the James gang and also what happened there, and the very interesting stories.
This Buck Duke and his brother, when they took over the company, did they kind of just ease on in and at first be like Dad, or were they just ruthless from day one?
Well, when their company was going strong in the 70s and 80s, they were very modest guys. I mean, they worked hard. I mean, these guys had to work hard to make this work. And so his dad was the leader on that. But then they got control of the market and became a monopolist. So when they became a monopolist, they could really make a lot of money. They used to give money to a little college in North Carolina called Trinity University. And so one day, Buck Duke goes to Trinity University for their board meeting. And he walked in, he says, I've given you guys a lot of money. I want you to change this school from Trinity University to Duke University. And that's where Duke University came from. Now, Duke University, they have a lot of tobacco money, but so does UK in Lexington, Kentucky. But Duke University had lots of money. And so that's why they become such a successful university. But Buck Duke had an ego that was pretty high. His daughter was Doris Duke, and Doris Duke was known as a poor little rich girl, and she ran around with guys like General Patton, Bing Crosby, Bob Hope. She ran with that crowd, and she was always called the poor little rich girl. So when Buck Duke died in 1925, he left her $2.9 billion with a B. Billion. That's how much money was involved in this. And then when she died in 1993, she had $11 billion. And I'm not sure how it all went, but a lot of that money went back to Duke University. And Duke University's put that money to good use. They've done very well.
Wow. So these night riders, it all came about because Duke started buying up the product, bringing the price, which brought the price down, and these guys were really sucking wind. Would you say penny a pound, 2 cents a pound?
Yeah, about 1900, 1902 is down about a penny to 2 cents a pound. Yeah. So a farmer, Point Pleasant, Kentucky, one farmer had a book that he wrote down there where he went to market with his tobacco. He got a penny a pound for it and walked home with not enough money to ever survive. And so when you got the prices down that low, the farmers then wanted to protect themselves. That's why they created the night riders.
Now, when they created the night riders, were they out front, or was it done in secret?
Oh, it was a secret organization. If you were, it was a sworn alliance. So if you had knowledge of who your night rider associates were, you were not allowed to talk about it. And the threat was, if you do, we'll kill you. So it was always secret. Now, there was lists. There was in Bracken County, there was a list of the night riders at one time. But when the thing came to an end in 1908, they burned the list. And so the night riders were never divulged. And then when the war was over with, all the people that were night riders went back into their farms, back into their businesses, back to the sheriff, the judges, and they just disappeared into the woodwork. And no prosecutions were ever done to any night rider.
Wow.
It was quite a story.
I sit when I was reading the book and I was thinking, how did these people keep this secret? I mean, now we got leaks like someone drilled holes in the pipe along the line.
That's today.
Yeah,
it didn't do that back then.
My oh my, that was a close knit organization, to say the least.
Close knit organization with that many people was very unusual. Yes. Now, one thing the night riders would do, if night riders found a guy selling to the trust, like my grandfather Kenny was, they'd come along at night. They throw a bundle of switches on the front porch, which meant tomorrow night we're coming back and we're going to pull you out of the house and we're going to horsewhip you. So Mr. Kenny got up about daybreak, rode his horse to Maysville, Kentucky, which is about 20 miles away. He brought the militia back to the farm, and they sat on our farm for 1 year with a company of men, our platoon of men. And then one night, the captain of the militia said, "Mr. Kenny, there's been no night rider activity here for a year. We're going to break camp in the morning. We're going back to Maysville." And Mr. Kenny said, "Well, there's nothing I can do about that." That night, the night riders were there, pulled him out of the house, horsewhipped him, and burned down all our tobacco barns. And then the night rider activity cranked back up in Bracken County at that time. That was about 1906, I believe.
They were very patient, I see.
Very patient.
They would go against any farmer or anyone that was dealing with the trust.
Correct.
And they would stop at no means. I mean, they wanted the message to be loud and clear that we're not going to tolerate this.
And they did. And that worked.
So during all this time, what about Buck Dukes? What was he doing? Was he hiding?
No, he wasn't hiding at all. He was in New York City, going back and forth to Europe, making money, selling tobacco products, and making a lot of money. Because his price of tobacco was so cheap, and Buck Duke had so much of it, because the night riders were trying to restrict the supply of tobacco, didn't make much difference because he had all the tobacco he needed. 1908, all the tobacco farmers, did not raise any tobacco and shut it off. Then that began to raise the price of tobacco back up. And then Buck Duke, and along with Rockefeller and those guys, they were met with the dissolvement of the trust about 1910, 1912, right through there.
So it was Theodore Roosevelt that started to break up in the monopolies. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And one of the first two that was broke up was the oil
and tobacco. Yes.
And that happened one in the morning and one in the afternoon of the same day, right?
Same day, yeah. That was pretty good. And that's on the Men of Made America. That was on that program. They talked about that. That's when John D. Rockefeller tried to defend his position as a owner of the oil companies. It didn't work.
And he's the one that said, "You're trying to take everything away from me."
Trying to take everything away from me that I built. I started an industry that didn't exist, and he was correct there. He was correct, but he created a monopoly, and monopolies from the Antitrust Act of 1890 are illegal. Monopolies are illegal even today. So now you got 4, 5, 6. You got a bunch of companies out there now that are monopolies, and they're operating illegally. So that's why the FBI and the Justice Department are investigating those guys to see what in the world's going on. But if they continue, if these big monopolies continue, they'll control the country and they'll control the people. And that's why it has to be busted up. Now, the reason Trump's in the book is we look for him to be the trust buster like Teddy Roosevelt. That's what I think is going to happen. So now, right now, the FBI and the Department of Justice is investigating all the monopolies. And there's more and more calls calling to break the monopolies up, and they need to be broken up. This country has to stand on capitalism and entrepreneurship, not socialism. Socialism is a death trap, as it was in Russia, the turn of the last century, Venezuela today, Nazi Germany in the 30s and 40s, Mussolini, Italy in the 30s and 40s, and several other socialist countries. They sell a big story, free this, free that, free education, free food, free housing. It's nuts. Nothing is for free. People have to work and earn a living and contribute. And you always have the bright side that if you want to work hard, you can do things. People come to this country all the time and create companies and become very wealthy because they work hard. You cannot take that away from the American people of entrepreneurship and capitalism. And that's what the Democrats are trying to do as we speak and what they're doing in Washington this week and last week. They think that they know best for the people. They don't know anything. They are the servants of the people. We are the owners of this country. The citizens of America own this country. We're the ones that are the capitalists. We're the ones that the working people. We're the ones that make the difference. The left-wing people have no business doing what they're doing because what they want to do is they want to make a socialist country and they want to control the people, the money, and everything. And it's not going to work.
You would think that we would learn from our mistakes, and it blows me away. I'll be sitting down and I'll be thinking, all the things that have happened in history, we are to learn from our own mistakes, from mistakes made in history, but yet we keep repeating it and repeating it and repeat.
Yeah, the reason you're going to repeat it is they don't teach history. So if you don't know the history, you're going to repeat.
Right.
That's what's going on now. They have taken history out of the classrooms. Now, one thing about my book, if we can get this thing to be a great seller, hopefully that will be the entrance point to bring history back in the school system. Elementary school, junior high school, and colleges. But you got all these liberals that say, get rid of that, and that it's a death trap.
For people, and I almost hate to say it, but it's so true. There are so many people, the only definition of monopoly to them that they've ever known is the monopoly game.
Yeah, well, we all played Monopoly as kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have We go to my grandparents' house in the early summer and spend the summer there. The Monopoly game never came down. We played it every day.
Right. But
And,
there's
and you always want to have Boardwalk and Park Place
yes,
on your spot.
and Pacific Avenue wasn't too bad either.
That's pretty good too.
Yeah, those three green ones down there.
Yeah.
But it's sad because that's when you mention Monopoly to a lot of people nowadays, that's all they think of. They have no clue of what a monopoly really is and why it's a death threat on America, do they?
It's a death threat, and most people don't realize it. And these big monopolies, especially the high-tech guys, they can wrap this country up and control it and own it. And that's why they have to be broken up.
I was telling Stephanie this afternoon, I remember when they broke up Ma Bell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Ma was Ma because she was the only Ma. But somebody had enough sense one day to say, look, we got to break it up, Ma. And then things were splintered off. And when that happens, all kind of good things take place. When is the last time that you know of that there was a big corp broke up?
I think that was it.
Yeah.
And what happened then, they tried to defend Ma Bell, and they said, we have 400,000 long-distance operators. And if you break up Ma Bell, those 400,000 people is going to be unemployed. Well, that was the threat. So what happened, they broke up Ma Bell anyway. And guess what happened with that? I think the last number I heard is that the telephone industry created 3.1, 3.2 million jobs at the sacrifice of 400,000 jobs. Mm-hmm. It was a great deal. So whoever did that, I'm not sure who did that. Whoever did that had the right idea, and they broke them up. And you start breaking up the Amazons and the Facebook and all these guys, you would create tremendous employment. And you know what else this would help do? This would help get the kids off drugs, get them to get their education. Now, an education is very important. Now, you don't have to be college educated. The things that you need to be successful in life is you don't need family, you don't need money, you don't need an education, so to speak. What you need is the willingness to work, number one, the desire for success, and just to get out there and do it. And that's what makes people successful. I heard a story, I think Trump said it. I think Trump said this. The past many years, I'm not sure what it was, 5 or 10 years, the most successful and most successful entrepreneurs and capitalists that we have right now are high school dropouts. Mm. The high school dropouts are looking at their position in life, and they're looking at their opportunities, and they're grabbing those opportunities and running with it. High school dropouts are not a bad thing. And so these guys are doing good. Now, I think the universities need to pay off the student loans. The reason I think they should pay off the student loans is because they have got these kids in the school, given them a worthless degree that goes nowhere, and they've charged them, $1.3 billion they're in debt? Mm-hmm. So if these colleges have taken the advantage of those kids to give them worthless education, they should cancel the debt, not the government.
That's true. Reading your book, I liked the part where you said that those men that had monopolies and government were intertwined.
They were, and they still are today.
Yeah, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Could you explain that to us?
Well, big government got in bed with big business back at the turn of the last century, and then it got busted up. Today, big government is in bed with big business again, especially your Facebook, your Googles, all the guys that's out there. And so they are there and they lobby and they get special perks out of the Congress with special laws that enhance their position to help their business move forward. That's been going on for a long time.
With speaking of Facebook, that's the only place I know, being on Facebook, that if you say the wrong thing or you say something too many times, they put you in Facebook jail. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah, they put you out. Yeah,
Yeah,
they do.
Yeah,
because it doesn't meet up with their criteria.
And it's not, it's not so much what you said. It's just you wasn't saying what they wanted you to say. That's censorship. Is that correct?
That's censorship. They're doing that, yes.
And that's happening all across the country. That's happening in universities, on Facebook, on all these big tech companies. It's almost like tippy-toeing through the tulips because they are so huge. When we had the recession and things were falling down like bricks out of the sky, could you explain to us why the bailout money?
Well, the finance guys were hooked into Washington. Things were going down the tubes pretty rapidly. Who's the mortgage company?
Stern? Was it?
Not Stern. Well, Stern went down. Who? Anime. Yeah, Anime.
Yeah.
So they were in over their head because they changed the rules so that a lower income person could buy a house that was above their means. And so all this thing went down the tubes. To save it, they had to dump lots of money into the economy to bring it back. And they did. So they bailed a lot of people out. They're still bailing people out. So that's why the debt is so high, of $23 trillion. Then Trump comes in and breaks up their little playpen. And that's why the Democrats are trying to get him out of office, because if they don't get him out of office, they're going to suffer big time because they're going to go out of business. The Democrats are going to be out the door, especially what they're doing in Washington last week and this week. They're making up stuff left and right to hang Trump, and they can't make anything stick.
With these monopolies, what do you see? What do you believe is going to happen? Do you think somebody's going to break these things up?
Well, I think Trump's going to break them up. He's the only guy that can break them up, just like Teddy Roosevelt. So Trump's very much like Teddy Roosevelt. And so if Teddy Roosevelt did his thing back then, even though they created the Fed and the IRS, I think Trump could break them up today. And it's easy to do because they're operating under the Sherman Antitrust Act. But then Reagan gave a reprieve back when he was in office that loosened up the Antitrust Act a bit. And that's what spurred on the monopolies to expand themselves. But now you got problems across the world because there's a lot of monopolies that's out there worldwide. And so the 1890 Antitrust Act needs to be updated and brought into today's environment.
What do you think the first step for us as Americans to see? I mean, this is the very first step that we have to take in order to see this accomplished.
Vote Republican in the next election and keep Trump in office. And get the liberal lefties out of office, and then go look at your schools and your colleges and get the lefty guys out of here.
If only America and the people, and like you said, I think we were off the air when you said it, these legislators, they don't roll over us. They work for us.
But they don't know that.
No, they don't know that. There's people that's in the House and in the Senate. Let's see, my son's 50 years old now. I believe there's people that's in the House and the Senate longer than he is old. There's something wrong with that picture. And I don't understand for the life of me why we can't move these people out. I mean, if we get that thing out of the way, then we can get something done.
Well, back at the end of World War II, or before the end of World War II, Congress decided that 4 terms for a president was too long. When you have a president in office for 4 years, 4 terms, as Roosevelt was, too much power corrupts. And so they then made it 2 terms for the president. But the Congress and Senate didn't vote 2 terms for them. So until we get term limits in the Congress and Senate, not going to change it because they're stuck in there and they fight for their lives. Now they have retirements, special health care. They have special perks. Those things all need to go away, and it should be back as the Constitution said. You go to work, you go to the office for 2 years or 4 years as Congress, maybe 6 years or 12 years as a senator. When you're done with that, you should have 2, I would say 3 terms for a congressman, 2 terms for a senator. You go home and let the young people come in. Now, I subscribe to the Bragg County News. It's my hometown paper. And the Bragg County News a few years ago had a story. The men of today are not the men we were. They're not as strong. They're not as honest. They don't work hard. They're basically lazy. And we fear for the threat of our country coming to an end. And guess when it was written? 1825.
1825.
So the feeling for young people and back in 1825 is somewhat the feeling of the young people today. But for some reason, the young people are always able to snap out of it and get things done and bring this country back where it belongs. Like when you and I were kids, I'm not sure how old you got to be close to my age. It was rock and roll, DuckTales, Peg Pants.
Yep.
And we were doomed. But this generation turned out pretty damn good.
Yeah, we were hoodlums, with the Vitalis in our hair, and that's when I had it. We were going to hell in a handbasket. We were going there quick. But yeah,
that's right.
You're right. We got our act together. I think we've done pretty well over the years.
We've done very well.
This, ladies and gentlemen, and I would encourage you, please, go to Amazon.com. Let me put this back up here again. You can go to Barnes & Noble, or you can go to, that's not it, that's Mr. Ed's. You can go to tobaccowars.com. And on Tobacco Wars, that's a pretty cool website that you have there, Mr. Jim.
Thank you. Stephanie put that together.
Yeah, there's photos and video, all different kind of media stuff. You can read. I think that's where Mr. Jim's mission is, what he pertains to do with the book and why he's doing it. So you need to go to the tobaccowars.com, and there, I think it's right up front. You can click on any one of those, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and go get this book. This is a part of history that people need to read about and need to learn about, because all through this book, and I'll tell you what, it's an interesting read. It's a hard-hitting read. It's historically fact, but it's one, and I was thinking of it this evening, it's one that I read this, but I'm going back and I'm going to read it again. And I mentioned this to Stephanie this afternoon. I can't recall of reading a book that had so many footnotes in it.
Oh, it's all documented, yes.
Yes. And I thought, wow. Now, I've read books where there's a couple footnotes here at the end of this and the end of that, and then at the end there's several, or sometimes many. But this one, every chapter has documentation. And if somebody would just spend a little bit of time, not only reading that book, but checking this stuff out,
Yeah, do the research.
Yeah, you could learn a vital part of history uh, that for some reason stayed in the dark. And
Hmm.
hopefully, Mr. Jim, we'll get this thing out there where people can see it, hear it, uh, and eventually maybe we'll get this thing out there on the screen or on the television
Yeah.
or something or another.
What's an interesting story on how I got the scrapbook. Always was attached to it. So my great grandfather, Mr. Kenny, gave it to his son Tom Kenny when he passed away. Mr. Tom Kenny, my grandfather, when he passed away, gave it to his son Tom Kenny Jr. Then when he passed away, my Aunt Joanne got it. And then when the kids, her daughters and son, broke up her housekeeping, because she was getting up in years, they broke up housekeeping. And so I called her up one day. I said, Joanne, what happened to the antiques? The antiques came down the Ohio River on flat bottom boats back at the end of the American Revolutionary War, which we were part of. And so she says, well, Jim, all the antiques go to the daughters, Judy, Hope, and Martha. I said, okay. Where's all the guns? Tom had a lot of guns. Well, your cousin Joe, he gets all the guns. I said, well, what happened to the Knight Rider book? She says, Jimmy, you get the Knight Rider book. That's how I got it.
Wow. Miss Wendy Wilson said, great interview. I want to read the book now. Well, it's available in Kindle too, isn't it, Jim?
I think. I'm not sure. If you go to Amazon.com, you can get it right away. Or if you order from us, theTobaccoWars.com, I'll sign it and send it out.
All righty. There you go, Wendy. There's something else I'm going to put up there. Oh, this is what I wanted to put up. There is Mr. Jim looking at some documents or some documentation of newspaper articles.
That's the scrapbook.
That's the scrapbook. My, oh, my. So you were the one that got the scrapbook.
Yes.
And that was under the couch, and you guys would pull it out and look through it.
As kids, yeah.
And you ended up with it. And you said it's what, 120 years old?
Yeah, it would be, because he started about 1900.
Wow, that is amazing.
What's amazing that it survived all this long because of floods and fires and all that. So they tore down the log cabin courthouse and built a new home with a white frame house on the same lot. Then the people that bought it, that house burned down many years later. And so if that book had been in there, it would have been gone. And they rebuilt a brick house in the same lot. So it was just a miracle that it's still here.
Wow.
Now we keep it locked up, and we protect it, and it's very part of our family.
Let me put this back up here again, because that is so vital. I've got my copy right here. Let me get it in the picture. I've got mine right here. Got right is left and left is right. A tremendous read, and I read it with my pen in hand because there are just so many historical facts to it and things like this. And some of these pictures, I guess that kind of tells the story right there, doesn't it, Mr. Jim?
Sure does. Pictures are everything.
Wow. And they were in the scrapbook too, huh?
Oh yes, everything there is in the scrapbook. That picture there is in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, where 100 night riders rode in there one night with feed sacks on the horses' hooves, and they went and knocked on everybody's door and they said, "We're here to burn down the warehouses. Stay inside." The first thing they did is they went to the jail and locked up the chief of police, and then they went on their way and told everybody to stay home. And they then burned down all the warehouses. And there's probably 500,000 to 1 million pounds of tobacco went up in flames.
Wow.
That was one of the biggest fires.
Wow. And I mentioned to you before we went on the air, that's one of my favorites right there.
Yeah. It's a good picture.
Covington troops prepared for service.
Mhm.
It, it's just an amazing, amazing story.
Well, they burned down a lot of tobacco warehouses in Covington, Kentucky, and also down in Carrollton, Kentucky, and also Louisville, Kentucky,
Wow.
and Lexington, and it's all over the countryside.
Have you met anyone else that has stories or clippings or anything of the past pertaining to these tobacco wars? Have you met anyone else like in Kentucky or Virginia?
Yeah, I met Bill Cunningham. Bill Cunningham wrote a book on bended knees, and he was a circuit judge of Eddyville, Kentucky, in Western Kentucky. And so I met with him in Hopkinsville one time with the scrapbook, and we talked about maybe putting together a movie or doing something like that. But nothing ever. This is probably 30 years ago. Nothing came of it. And then I ended up meeting his cousin up in Detroit one day for lunch. Didn't know it was his cousin. And the guy says, "My name is Jeff Cunningham." I says, "Where are you from?" He says, "I'm from Western Kentucky." I says, "Do you know Bill Cunningham?" "Oh, yeah, that's my cousin." Well, I said, What's Bill doing now? He says, "Well, he got a new job." So I said, "Okay, give me his phone number." So I came back and I called him up one day. I said, "Bill, I heard you got a new job." "Jim, I did." He's the Supreme Court Justice of the state of Kentucky.
Wow.
And so he wrote that book many years ago. So there's several books out there, and there's one movie out there which is pretty good. It's called Bright Leaf. Gregory Peck was in it, and Vivian somebody was in it, and that tells part of the story about the tobacco wars and about Buck Duke's father-in-law, who didn't like each other at all. So there's many, many, many stories tied up with tobacco.
What was the Supreme Court man? He wrote the book. What it was
on bended knees.
On bended knees. All
Mm-hmm.
right.
It's very good. Very good. He wrote more about Western Kentucky, and this book is more about Northern Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met with him and talked with him several times, he said he wished he'd gone to Bracken County to see what was going on with the tobacco wars in Bracken County, but never did. So that's where this story comes from. It's basically Northern Kentucky.
Terry said, "A forgotten part of our history that needs to be told." Oh, yes.
Yes, it is.
I agree with that 100%. Wow. This is tremendous. And that scrapbook is absolutely amazing.
Oh, it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, look, I can't emphasize to you enough, and we'll put more up on the Facebook page. We'll put more out on our blog. We'll run it up on the radio, but we'll get this out. We'll pass it on to other people so that they can pass it on to other people. And maybe we could get this thing cranked up and rolled out there that somebody will get interested and say, "Hey, let's put this thing up on the screen. If not the great big screen, but to put it up on every TV screen in this country."
Yeah, it'd be a great movie.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would.
A great documentary.
Tobacco, Trust, and Trump. Ladies and gentlemen, here's your homework assignment. Google. Google monopolies, trust. Just Google it. Find out what it is all about. Do some homework. Get in there and do some research. But first of all, get this book, Tobacco, Trust, and Trump. Go to the tobaccowars.com. Get you a copy. And I personally know Miss Wendy. If she said she's going to get it, you can rest assured that Miss Wendy is going to get it. So let's start the ball rolling, folks, and get this out there. And tell everyone, if you watch this tonight, you pass the word on. Start your watch party. Kick it out there into the stratosphere or cybersphere or whatever they call it out there nowadays. But just kick it out there everywhere. Uh, Tell friends and family, everybody, about this tonight. Tremendous, Mr. Jim. Tremendous. I am so happy that I got to meet you tonight. Uh, I'm so glad that Stephanie came on this afternoon. Uh, she really set the tone for tonight. I've been excited from day one and how this all came about. And as you said before we went on the air, divine intervention. I'm a firm believer in that. So we're going to see where this journey takes us, and we're going to have you come back again because we want progress reports as the journey goes on. Will you do that for us?
We'll sure do that, George, and I appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure talking with you. You're very, very knowledgeable about your audience and about you got a lot of history behind you.
Yeah, I've always been one that wants to prepare and be prepared. I'm an avid reader. My wife's an avid reader. When we were kids, we used to read the back of the cereal boxes. Do you
That's
remember?
right.
So,
we did. Yeah.
So we're both avid readers, and I'll read anything, any place, anytime. But I'm especially interested in history and this great country of ours. I just pray that God will keep his hands on us and we'll get this ship righted.
We will. It'll be fine.
All righty, sir. I thank you very much. Ladies
Again.
and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans and countrymen, thank you for lending me both of your ears. And like I said before, get the word out. Start those watch parties. Push this thing out there. Get the book. Get the book.
George, thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome, sir. And I trust that God will keep you right in the center of his hand.
You too. You also.
All righty. Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Ladies
sir.
and gentlemen, boys and girls, and when you hear Espenlaub push the right button, okay. Sometimes he can blow it up. But when you hear this, you know that it's just about time for us to scoot out of here. Charlie and I are going to beat feet, aren't we, Charlie? Okay. I could go for a great big hot cup of coffee right now. First thing in the morning, last thing at night. I don't know if that's good or not, but I've been doing it all these years. No need to quit now. But
don't quit now. Keep
right.
it up.
That's right. So here's what we want to do, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans and countrymen. We want to wish you a very, very pleasant evening. Whether you're down the street, around the corner, people down the street, around the corner actually listen to this thing. Across America, you betcha. And around the world. Oh, yeah. Guam, Australia, the UK, South Africa. It goes on and on and on and on and on and on. So whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world, I want to thank you for stopping in tonight because this was a vital piece of history. And you, like me, are hearing it for the first time. So make sure you get the book, the tobaccowars.com. Wow. So if it's nighttime where you're at, you have a great night. If it's already daytime, you have a great day. I love that because we're here today, and I've interviewed people from Australia and different parts of the world. I'd be interviewing here today, that'd already be into tomorrow. That stuff just blows my mind. But anyhow, if it's already today, you have a great day. And listen, if we brought a smile to your face in some way, shape, or form, we're happy. We're very, very happy. But remember, we want to make it goofy just like the rest of us here at the Funny Farm. So till tomorrow night, Mr. Ed Temple from Columbus, Ohio will be back with us. He's the school teacher. He gave us homework last week, so let's get it done and report in tomorrow night. It make him so proud of us students. Will we do that? All right, ladies and gentlemen, till tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. This is George Espenlaub and the whole gang here at the Funny Farm, and there is a gang of them. I wish you a very pleasant evening, a great day, and I just trust that God will keep you right in the center of his hand. Good night, everybody.
Good night, George.
Good night, buddy. And I hope you enjoyed the audio part of our live stream. It was a tremendous, tremendous program. And if you haven't taken the time to get the book, or if this is the first time you've heard about it, just go to Tobacco Wars. That's tobaccowars.com. Get you a copy. It is enlightening. It's intriguing. It is relevant for this day and age in which we live. We are still contemplating, that's a big word, Espenlaub. We are still contemplating on whether to come back with another show tonight or not. We're leaning in that direction, but we will be posting something if we do, and it will be just a little while before we come back if we do. I thank you for tuning in tonight, and if you was watching the football game and had your earbuds in at the same time, hey, my hat's off to you. You know I always wear my George Espenlaub radio show hat, so I tip my hat to you. If you know someone that didn't hear the show tonight, and remember we had 2 shows thus far tonight, we're thinking about the third. Number one, earlier tonight we had Anthony Griggs, former linebacker for Philadelphia Eagles and Cleveland Browns, with us, and he's such a delightful person. You just fall in love with Anthony. You can't help it. He's so full of energy, vitality. He's intense, and he really cares about people. That's what makes him so special. If you didn't hear that, you can come back and listen to it all over again. And if you know someone that didn't listen to this show, tell them they can come back and listen to it. And you can download any show and distribute them near, far, and wide. And we would appreciate it if you would do so. It's just about time to sign off for this segment of tonight's show. And Charlie and I and Gertrude and a couple of the other people put our heads together and see if anybody wants to crank up one more before it's all over. So, excuse me, I'm going to get rid of this cold before it's all over. Wow, what a delightful time. So we got 2 in the bucket. 2 in the bucket. Are we going to do 3? Are they going to do 3? Nope. We might. But check out the George Espenlaub Show page on Facebook because we'll post it. That's where it'll go first. And then it'll go to worldwide internet radio, whatever thingies that's out there. And someplace else we post it. And hopefully people send it all over the place. And yes, please. When you see our posts on our Facebook page or other places, please share that. Because that pushes that out to people that we can't reach. People will see your feed, and we can't reach everybody. So we're really counting on you guys to help push us out there. Same way with the live stream videos that we do. They're on our George Espenlaub Show page. You can go back and you can look at any one of them if you choose. But start a watch party. Because that sends it out into your news feed, to your family, to your friends. And then ask them to start a watch party, and that'll send it out to their family and friends. And that's how that works. That's how it gets out there to the masses. And we want to get these out to the masses. So, I thank you for tuning in tonight. It's 8 o'clock, or no, it's 9:15 p.m. here on the East Coast. I trust that you're having a very wonderful Sunday evening. Yeah, I know, Monday's coming. Oh well. If we have a good evening, maybe Monday won't be so bad. But anyhow, if you're down the street around the corner, across America, somewhere around this great big world, this is George Espenlaub, speaking for the whole gang here at the Funny Farm, saying thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those that are going to be listening later. And I just trust that you'll have a very, very pleasant evening. Now, be kind one to another. Help one another. I just trust that God will keep you right in the center of His hand. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans and countrymen, this is George Espenlaub saying thank you. God bless you.